Hey everybody, Rock Guy here, going over 5 decent albums of 2020. So, as you can imagine, 2020 brought a lot of interesting music, a lot of good music, a lot of bad music, and a lot of music that was just fairly mediocre. Because much like life and much like people, music can be any one of those three things. It can be exceptionally exceptional, terrible, or just okay. So, with that in mind, I thought this is a very underrepresented category in music. I think of the following albums as something that wasn't exceptionally good enough for me to put in my best of list, but at the same time, not bad enough for me to completely dismiss it. Overall, I don't want this to be something I completely forget or ignore because I think records like this are important, not only for myself as a listener and a fan, but within the context of the band's discography because we could see where the band goes from here, whether they make a more interesting record the next time around, or if this is a sign of bad to come, basically a downward slope from here. Without further ado, here are 5 decent albums that range essentially from meh to very good. Not great. If it was great, it would have been in my best of list, but very good nonetheless, and maybe a sign of some better things to come in the future. It should be noted that these are ranked. So unlike the last video where I was pretty much recommending them all fairly equally, everything on this list has a hierarchical order. So basically this ranges from albums I enjoyed the least to the one I enjoyed the most. The best of the most okay albums of 2020. So without further ado, let's get started. So at the bottom of our list, we have Pearl Jam with Gigaton. It's another experimental album by Pearl Jam. Yeah, I can make an entire video just talking about my experiences as a Pearl Jam fan and what their music has and hasn't done for me throughout the years. As for Gigaton, I was definitely in the minority of people, especially Pearl Jam fans, who enjoyed Lightning Bolt. I thought Lightning Bolt was a very good return to form. I thought it was the closest Pearl Jam has sounded to their 90s output since the 90s. But regardless, I think that's a very good rock album. So it does have positive association bias because when I listen to Lightning Bolt, I remember a lot of the best moments of my life at that time. However, I still think the record holds up very well. In terms of my personal ranking of Pearl Jam's albums, Lightning Bolt is very high, in the top 3. So with Gigaton, 7 years later after Lightning Bolt, I wasn't even sure what to expect. 7 years is a long time in between records. I know Pearl Jam isn't the most consistent band when it comes to putting out records routinely and consistently, but I didn't really think they would take a near decade in between this one and the last one. And for the most part, this record really let me down. I actually really do like the first single off this album. I think Dance of the Clairvoyance is a very neat Talking Heads inspired electro track that shows off Pearl Jam's versatility and their range. But for the most part, this record just fell completely flat for me. It should be noted that my 2 other favorite songs off this album, Quick Escape and Take the Long Way, could have very well been on Lightning Bolt. So the fact that I like them isn't really something of note or exception. Superblood Wolf Moon is probably my least favorite song on the album. I think it's annoyingly catchy for a Pearl Jam song. And I find this to be particularly ironic since Pearl Jam has actively fought against making material that's catchy or that has an ear hook or an earworm or that's radio accessible. I mean, this is the same band that left Sad off of Binaural because they thought it was too poppy, and yet they have something with an annoyingly memorable verse and chorus as Superblood Wolf Moon. So I still recommend this album despite where you may stand on Pearl Jam. So if you're one of those people that hasn't enjoyed anything from Pearl Jam since Vitology, I would suggest checking this out just to see how much the band has evolved since the 90s to now. And of course, if you're a Pearl Jam fan or if you just love anything Pearl Jam does, then I could see this record being good for you. However, for me, it's just going to be in one of my least favorites of theirs. It doesn't rank very high in terms of my own personal album ranking. For their following record, I hope they recapture the spirit that made me want to be a Pearl Jam fan in high school. And that is why Gigaton is at the bottom of this list. At our number 4 spot, we have a new band actually, One Way North with Too Light. So, like many people, I was exposed to One Way North through seeing Aaron Scott's cover of Fuel's Hemorrhage on either The Voice or The X Factor. I don't know exactly. But I wasn't in the minority of people who made obvious Chris Daughtry comparisons, seeing as Chris Daughtry also covered Hemorrhage when he performed it on American Idol back when he was a contestant. It's not hard to see the comparisons. I think both of them were very rock heavy amongst their contemporaries. Both of them were adding a new spin to the music, something more in terms of pop heavy than what the other contestants were trying to do. And both of them were bald. I mean, that's something to know. How often do bald guys sing Hemorrhage by Fuel? It's like finding a unicorn. So, with that cover and with Fuel being one of my favorite bands, I wanted to see what Aaron Scott was about, what his music sounded like, to see if it had something more in common with Fuel, a band that I've loved for many years at this point, or if it was more like Chris Daughtry, basically, for lack of a better term, mom rock, or rock for the most accessible group of people, or the most accessible rock for basically any casual listener. So I listened to Light, which was actually released in a few months prior to Aaron Scott covering Hemorrhage. Especially when comparing it to both of those artists, Fuel and Daughtry, I would say it ranks somewhere in the middle. So I don't like Daughtry's music. I really dislike his first album and pretty much every album after that. The only song I like off the first album is It's Not Over. And that barely counts considering structurally it's very similar to Hemorrhage by Fuel. So with To Light, I think they're more of a mixed bag. Basically, it's hard not to compare this to Daughtry's music because one, it's very heavy on post-grunge, and two, it's very pop-oriented. I think the biggest problem with To Light is it's a very dated record, being that this album is very heavily influenced by post-grunge of the 2000s, the early to mid 2000s. It sounds extremely out of place in 2020. Like, this sounds like a record that should have come out in 2008 at the latest. And another thing is, with how pop influenced this record is, it doesn't really feel... It's lacking an edge that a band like Fuel has. They even have a cover of that song, Someone You Love, the rock cover. And I don't even know how to feel about that. Because to some degree, it feels like by including that cover, One Way North is already selling out before they've even quote-unquote made it. And I think another frustrating thing about this album is upon delving into One Way North's discography, I realized they could actually make pretty good music. I would actually recommend From Darkness much more than To Light, because From Darkness, while also particularly dated, also very heavy on post-grunge, it succeeds at what it's attempting to do more so than To Light does. Another grating issue with this album is it feels very passive. So what I mean by that is, going back to what I said about Fuel, One Way North, as of now, seems to lack that edge bands like Fuel, Creed, or even Nickelback and Puddle of Mudd had to their sound. If you're a Lifehouse fan, I could see you enjoying this because this album does feel very Lifehouse, or maybe even something more typical of a band like the Goo Goo Dolls, in that this band is essentially riding the line on soft rock so hard to the point where it's borderline Christian rock. And this is even seen in one of my favorite songs on the album, Lie to Me, which, as heavy as One Way North can be, but it doesn't exactly go to that next level that you would expect a band so well versed in post-grunge to go to. Nothing That You Need is definitely the best song on the album. That's the most Fuel-like song on the album. Lyrically and musically, it's just a great song. I really do think this shows what One Way North's capabilities are and what they can accomplish in the future. Taking Over is also a very good song, just a very, really solid post-grunge song. Overall, I think One Way North's album is notable more so in that it's a sign of what's to come as opposed to what it is right now. I know Aaron Scott is no longer in The Voice, so I'm not exactly sure where One Way North is going to go after this. He released a solo song not too long ago that I thought was pretty good. Nothing particularly groundbreaking or revolutionary, but it was good nonetheless. So I don't know if One Way North is just going to get rebranded as Aaron Scott's solo band, or if One Way North is going to continue and Aaron Scott is as well. It's kind of eerie too because Fuel just announced that Brett Scallions is no longer in the band. So, of course, there's rumors that Aaron Scott can be the new singer for Fuel, much in the same way Chris Daughtry's name was thrown around the first time this happened, the first time Brett Scallions was no longer in Fuel. So, as far as that goes, I think I would really like to see Aaron Scott in Fuel. I think Aaron Scott, he's a naturally talented songwriter, but if he works with someone more well versed in the history of songwriting, and someone who has a deeper understanding of rock music than he does, such as Carl Bell, he can really go to the next level and he can excel exceptionally. I think he's a point of interest, and I'm going to be talking about Aaron Scott and One Way North for most of this decade, hopefully. And hopefully they'll release an album that really resonates with me again in the same way From Darkness did. At our number 3 spot, we have No One Sings Like You Anymore, Part 1 by Chris Cornell. I wasn't even sure about including this one on this list, mainly because it's less of a covers album and more of a compilation of covers that Chris Cornell never got to finish completely. And that's not to say any of these songs sound bad. They're not demo level. They're actually fairly good. But they do still feel like rough drafts. And I can't deny that it does feel a little bit exploitative that Chris Cornell's estate would release this when they could have released this included as part of that massive Chris Cornell box set that came out in 2018 or 2019. I'll give them the benefit of the doubt and assume that the reason this wasn't released with that is because they couldn't get the rights to put it out. But it still kind of hangs over the record, even more so since there's apparently a part 2 coming out, and I don't know how long this is going to go on for. I hope there's nothing past part 2. Not because I don't want to hear Chris Cornell's voice anymore, but because it just seems wrong to keep releasing every old idea he once had. Especially since Chris Cornell himself didn't really see a lot of these songs fit for the public at the time of release. But overall, I really do like this for what it is. I think I like it more so as a representation of what Chris Cornell has accomplished as a mainstream artist. The best song on here is definitely Patience, his Guns N' Roses cover. And what's neat about this Patience cover is its full circle aspect to it. For those of you who might know, Guns N' Roses actually covered Soundgarden in the 90s on their covers album. And then Chris Cornell would later eventually cover Guns N' Roses. Like, it's cool. They complete each other, and I like that a lot. That's also my personal favorite song on the album. I really love the Prince cover a lot too. More so because I don't think any song on this album demonstrates Chris Cornell's contribution to mainstream culture than that song. In regards to that cover, I would see people who I didn't even know like Chris Cornell celebrating that song and posting it and sharing it. So it really demonstrates Chris Cornell's universality and his wide appeal to people of all musical backgrounds. I think if you're a Chris Cornell fan, this is like an absolute must. Even with that element of incompletion or not finished cloud hanging over the covers album, it's still very good. It's on the middle of my list, so it was definitely the one I enjoyed as far as something directly in the middle compared to the 2 records before this and the 2 records that are going to come after. Yeah, I recommend it. I think it's interesting and it shows off Chris Cornell's talent and versatility. So check it out. At our 2nd spot, we have Violent Allies by 10 Years. So 10 Years is a band I've been trying to get into for at least since I was in high school, actually. It's been well over a decade that I've actually been keeping up with 10 Years. I remember Fix Me being my favorite song of sophomore year. And they always released music I enjoyed, but they could never quite land an album that hit with me completely. They're very similar to what I said about Bush and Five Finger Death Punch in the last video, in that I enjoy bits and pieces off of each album, but I never really had something that I loved from beginning to end. And in this case, I still don't. So with Violent Allies, it's notable in that this is the most amount of songs I like off of a single 10 Years album. But at the same time, there isn't anything on here that really resonates with me in the way their past singles did. So I literally like half of this album. Like, there's a solid half of the entire album that I enjoy. But amidst that half, there isn't a single song that competes with something like Miscellanea, or Dancing with the Dead, or Backlash, or Beautiful, or Waking Up, or Wastelands, or really any of these amazing 10 Years songs. So that's pretty interesting that it doesn't have that big single that I've loved from 10 Years. but I enjoy more songs off this particular release than any of their prior releases. So it's almost like they traded, for the most part, a solid album in favor of an accessible single. And I'm not sure how to feel about that, actually. Primarily because I really liked 10 Years Past singles. I thought they were very good, and I'm a little disappointed that I don't really have anything I could put against those past songs. But at the same time, I think this is a good sign of what's to come. I really do think 10 Years can probably, or at least I really do think the next 10 Years album is more likely to resonate with me than this one did. And they're that much closer to releasing an album I'm going to love, in the same way Five Finger Death Punch and Bush did this year. So it's a good record. It's a very solid piece of hard rock. Overall, I think it's a step in the right direction, and it gives me a lot of, it leaves me with a lot of hope as far as what to expect from 10 Years this decade. So check it out. And at our number one spot, the best of the most okay albums, or the borderline great record, if you will, we have Bring Me the Horizon with Post-Human Survival Horror. So this record is very significant to me as a listener. So this EP represents a lot of character development and growth for me as a listener, because I used to hate Bring Me the Horizon. In fact, I couldn't stand this band. Basically, I came from the generation where it was cool to celebrate being a douchebag. So my era was Snapbacks, Project X, Swag. I think Nicki Minaj was just blowing up around that time, and LMFAO was huge too. Oh god, we also had the haters thing. Like, I think I still remember what the acronym was. Hating anyone that ever reaches success. Okay, boomer. I think I'm gonna go wash my mouth out with acid for saying that. Basically, a majority of popular trends amongst my generation were obnoxious and stupid. And this extended into rock music as well. And Bring Me the Horizon was basically the flagship band for things I hated in rock music at that time. God, I just couldn't stand their fan base, and I hated their music more than anything else. I thought they were the worst thing I'd ever heard. I was one of those people that would comment on videos of like a Coldplay song saying still more metal than Bring Me the Horizon. God, they were just like the quintessential posers for me. I still remember their third album title, I believe. Or maybe it was their second album. There is a hell, believe me, I've seen it. There is a heaven, let's keep it a secret. Ugh, God. It's just so edgy and annoying. Like, it just pissed me off. Like, just knowing this band existed got on my nerves. For many years, I rejected Bring Me the Horizon. I would basically talk crap about them any chance I got. That is until 2013, when they started releasing music that was a little more accessible than their deathcore stuff. Stuff that I was able to enjoy. Can You Feel My Heart and Sleepwalking in particular were songs I really liked. And it doesn't help that they came out in 2013, which, as you know, is probably my favorite year ever. So again, the positive bias association is there as well. And Bring Me the Horizon would maintain this throughout the decade. So I really liked Throne and Happy Song as well. Bring Me the Horizon was constantly releasing music or easing me into music that I liked by them. It wasn't anything particularly groundbreaking or revolutionary for me, but I would take note of it. Like, oh wow, I actually do enjoy the new Bring Me the Horizon song. I liked Mantra and Medicine as well. I really think those are very solid experimental songs from the band. They show off the band's versatility. You know what? I really it's just like that. Like, I was enjoying Bring Me the Horizon. So with each subsequent release, Bring Me the Horizon had something I liked a little bit more and more. Even if I didn't like the entire release, they were releasing music that I was able to appreciate and enjoy. They were releasing music that I just wouldn't automatically reject because I was no longer in my hateful echo chamber for Bring Me the Horizon. So it makes sense that this would be the best release after those amount of years, because I really do think this is a very solid rock album. In fact, alongside I Disagree, Misanthropocene, and Negative Balance, I would say this is one of the most innovative rock albums, or rock EPs, of 2020. And the whole reason I even wanted to check this out was because I noticed a song title. Itch for the Cure, which is a very obvious reference to Linkin Park's Cure for the Itch. Once I saw that, I'm like, you know what? It was on the release day of Post-Human Survival Horror. And once I saw that, I was thinking, you know what, maybe I should listen to this. Let's just see what this is about. And I'm so happy I did, because this is a very, very good EP. And I think it's a sign of many good things to come for Bring Me the Horizon. Teardrops is very good. That's probably the most Linkin Park influenced song on the album. And it comes off in a way that's honorable towards Linkin Park and not derivative or ripping off. You really see how much Chester Bennington inspired the band when you listen to Teardrops. Parasite Eve is very good as well. I think that's just a really good rock song. Not too distant from the last songs I've been enjoying by Bring Me the Horizon in the prior decade, but you know, it's still good nonetheless. The Amy Lee song is also very solid, and unfortunately it has some of that Bring Me the Horizon poserness that I hate, and there's no way I'm going to attempt to recite that song title. It's just the Amy Lee song to me. But regardless of that annoying title, it's still a very, very beautiful track, and it shows off Bring Me the Horizon's range. It really puts to rest the criticisms shot at the band by people like me, who would just assume they were another annoying deathcore band that would scream and growl, and were pretty much there to pander to teenage angst. So overall, I think this is the most borderline great album of 2020. Like I said, it still wasn't good enough for me to actually commit to the whole record and for me to make this something in my collection. But it did put to rest a lot of unfair and, if we're being honest, unjust criticisms I had about Bring Me the Horizon. The best song on the album, 100%, is absolutely Kingslayer featuring Baby Metal. This song in particular is exactly why I said Bring Me the Horizon is pushing rock forward as a genre. Because Kingslayer, much like the most recent Grimes album and the most recent Poppy album, is a metal song juxtaposed with pop music, in this case J-pop. And my god, is it so freaking cool. I love how this came out. I really don't have a negative thing to say about this. And it's definitely not only my favorite Bring Me the Horizon songs, but it's one of my favorite rock songs, like by far. I think this is just a very interesting song, and I would like to see Bring Me the Horizon explored in the future. I really do think there's something to this genre. I can't think of a better band to be the flag carrier for this genre than Bring Me the Horizon. Of course, Poppy is doing it very well as also, but she's a solo artist. I think Bring Me the Horizon could take this sound to a mainstream level as a band. But overall, this is a very good EP, and it's something that leaves me a lot of hope for rock's future, especially seeing as rock, as I said in the last video, hasn't been the most innovative genre as of late. I think this pushes rock forward in a way that can probably recapture its spirit and hopefully appeal once more to a young mainstream audience. So if you haven't heard this Bring Me the Horizon EP, and especially if you're someone who hates Bring Me the Horizon and you've pretty much dismissed everything they've ever done before, check it out. And those were my most okay albums of 2020. What were your most okay albums of 2020? What was not particularly great to you, but also not terrible? What just left you feeling very, eh? Were any of my albums on your, were any of the albums I talked about on your most okay list? Were there any albums you loved that I included on this list? Were there any albums you hated that I included on this list? Let me know down in the comment section below. And as always, be calm, be cool, be collected, and see you later.